All right, thank you all for coming this evening. This is the regular meeting of the Terre Haute City Council. It's a little bit after 6 p.m., Thursday, May 10th, 2018. We begin each of our regular meetings with a moment of silence and the Pledge of Allegiance. The Pledge of Allegiance tonight will be led by Councilman Nation, and the council would like to dedicate the moment of silence to Officer Pitts this evening.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please, Michelle.
Councilperson Aller.
Present.
Councilperson Azar.
Here.
Councilperson Costin.
Present.
Councilperson DeBon.
Here.
Councilperson Elliott.
Here.
Councilperson Garrison.
Present.
Councilperson Morris.
Here.
Councilperson Nasser.
Present.
Councilperson Nation.
Here.
All are present.
Thank you. Now we will have 30 minutes of time for public comments. We want to please try and keep your comments to around 3 minutes if you can. We do have a lot of people here. A lot of people want to speak on items. If the item you want to speak on is on the agenda further down, wait until we get to that. This is for items that are not on the agenda. Having said that, is there anybody who would like to address the council? And please name and address when you come up for the record. Thank you.
Thank you for letting me speak, City Council. I'm very nervous. I'm very nervous, and Councilwomen, but I'm
Thank you.
I live at 1453 Chase Street. It's right down from Firehouse 3. For 12 years, it took my legally blind husband. We cannot leave our home, one or the other has to be there. But my legally blind husband would walk to the police station, spoke to Blassie, I don't know titles like that, and we kept trying to get them to make the neighbors, which is well over a football field away, just to make them stop playing their music so loud. We tried to talk to the neighbors, and they left me with some very colorful words. I'm sorry. So anyway, I thought I was going to come down here and speak badly, but at this point, I realized that we need to give the police officers a recommendation because they put up with us calling them because we got tired of fighting, and not fighting, but arguing with our neighbors over their music too far away. And there was only 2 that was not happy, but one of them came back and apologized and said, "Oh, we're sorry. We realize now it wasn't your fault. They're in another neighborhood, and they're being just as bad as they were when they lived next door to you." We have, out of all of that time that we lived in our home, there was shooting. We still have a bullet hole up in our awning. A guy was stabbed in front of our house. We called the ambulance. There was prostitution, a lot of out open drug activity, but it was a long journey, and it was very hard. But the officers were so proud of them that stepped up, and I want to at least acknowledge Sergeant Lieutenant Holland. He was I never seen an officer like that man. He came over. We thought he left because we were complaining about the neighbor. the neighbor was naked. And we prayed, we're Christians, and he prayed with us. My husband and I went back into the home, we went to bed, had the windows open. The guy next door is yelling, "Hey, Cecil, come to the bed." Well, my husband, he grabbed his phone, he's going to take a picture, and we were so amazed. Out of 12 years, these two officers stayed. They were hiding in his own backyard, and he didn't even know it. And they arrested him, and he was naked. But I guess I don't have anything else to say, but when we ask the officers to step up, they do. We only have 2 houses in our neighborhood that will not comply. But I think that y'all are doing a wonderful job, and I hope I'm making sense. I see Mr. Nasser. Okay. And for years I was sick, and I've had many surgeries, but I'm well now. I'm able to do things, and I'm ready to start volunteering for my neighborhood. And I thank you for letting me speak to you, and God bless you, all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would anybody else like to speak to the council?
My name is Donald Hyde, 1411 Poplar Street. Well, I had planned to continue what I've been doing here, but I'm going to have to change what I was going to say tonight to something else. I continue to talk about the county, the city, and the county's fabric that I call the fabric that holds the county together. I think that I need to clarify something about that fabric. And I don't think that this city council, the county council, and especially the people of Terre Haute, Indiana, appreciate what the fabric is. First of all, the fabric that we're trying to hold together is our community. But what we fail to take into consideration when I talk about, I'm one of the liberals, I'll admit it, the YMCA, the Boys Club, the schools, that's only part of that fabric. One of the part of the fabric that gets ignored a lot is the police. You cannot have a good city, a good community, unless you have a good police force. And the police force is cooperated with. Whether you like it or not, you've got to cooperate with them. Second of all, you've got to help them out. I see a lot of holes in the social fabric of our community that have nothing to do with the police. They have their own holes. The city council, the mayor, the state of Indiana, by the United States of America, is constantly cutting budgets. And when they cut budgets, they also cut the budget of the police. Now, we complain all the time about the way the police act or behave or whatever, but what we don't take in consideration is how much time and how much money they have in their budget for training. There's a lot of holes in both the fabric of the community and in the fabric of the police. The city council can do something about both. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to speak?
It is not time.
Okay, last opportunity for public comments. Okay, let's move on. Corrections of the journal.
There are none.
Communication from the mayor.
There are none.
Reports from city officials.
There are none.
Reports from Board of Public Works and Safety.
There are none.
Reports from standing committees.
There are none.
Reports from non-standing committees.
There are none.
Items previously tabled.
There are none.
Items on second, forgive me, tax abatements for confirmation.
There are none.
Items on second reading.
Special Ordinance 3, 2018, vacating a portion of an east-west public alley located north of 3214 North 14th Street and south of 1361 Fort Harrison Road in Terre Haute, Vigo County, Indiana. No problems were noted.
Petitioner.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the council. My name is Rick Shagley. I'm taking the place of the younger Mr. Shagley, who's on a school trip. If you wouldn't mind, I'd like to discuss 3 and 4 at the same time. It's the same project. I think you're all aware of it. 3 is the vacation of an alley in the middle of this project. 4 is the rezoning of 3 lots in the middle and the alley that's being vacated. This is for commercial development, and I would be happy to answer any questions you might have. It has a favorable recommendation, no remonstrators as far as I am aware.
Is there anybody in the public who would like to speak on Special Ordinance 3, 2018? Council.
Mr. President,
Councilman Morris?
if there's no comment, I ask that we vote on Special Ordinance 3.
Mr. President, this was discussed last week, so there's no need to take that step.
We don't need to take that step.
It was discussed last
Okay,
week.
then I ask that we vote on Special Ordinance. Move to
Approved.
approve.
Second.
Okay, it has been,
I hate these new rules.
it has been moved to approve Special Ordinance 3, 2018 by Councilman Morris and seconded by Councilwoman Aller. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes.
Thank you.
Next item, please.
Special Ordinance 4, 2018, rezoning of property located at 3212 through 3214 North 14th Street and a portion of a vacated alley north of 3214 North 14th Street. Area Planning gave a favorable recommendation with conditions.
Petitioner.
Yes, we have discussed this, but I'd be happy to answer any more questions. The conditions were the normal conditions that you have with a rezoning ordinance.
Is there anybody in the public who would like to speak on Special Ordinance 4, 2018? Council.
Mr. President,
Councilwoman Aller.
there's no further questions. I move that we approve Special Ordinance 4, 2018 as presented.
Second.
It has been moved by Councilwoman Aller and seconded by Councilwoman Crossan that we approve Special Ordinance 4, 2018. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes.
And thank you again.
Next item, please.
Special Ordinance 5, 2018, rezoning the property located at 601 South Fruit Ridge Avenue. Area Planning gave a favorable with conditions recommendation.
Petitioner.
Good evening, Council and Mr. President. We had some discussion about this a week ago tonight. I don't want to replow the same ground, but I would say that, start by saying 2 years ago, I'll remind you, there was this same piece of ground came up for rezoning for apartments, and at that time, there were literally hundreds of people who were in opposition to that proposed development. At the end of the day, I've spent some time, now that these are all audio recorded, going back and listening when Mr. Nation chaired the meeting and kind of kept order, but just wanted to make sure, and it's there for anyone who cares to listen. The opposition, at the end of the day, said no to apartments, but they said they would accept condominiums with the condition that they be single-story, not vertically stacked. So 2 years later, Mr. Anderson, kind of relying on that, approached Mr. Regal, the original developer, and they've entered, as I disclosed last week, into a contract to purchase. And the ordinance that governs this development, ultimately, after doing some survey work, Thompson Ditch, which is a huge easement that the city, and actually I think it's the sanitary district, holds, cuts through this, and there are several easements for utilities and sewer and other things that cut through this. So some of the actual survey acreage is just slightly under 16 acres. But when you take those things out that can't be built, it's something less than that. The audio tape back then with a different surveyor kind of represented that it was between 13 and 14 buildable acres. So the point of that is, when you go to our ordinance and divide the acreage by certain units, by a number of units, or actually by the minimum square footage of units, you come out with a maximum number of units permitted in the R2 in this kind of development. And depending on how much buildable acreage this survey comes out with, it could be as high as 92 units. The point of that is, when this was being designed and consideration was being given to, okay, what preceded this, what were the sticking points, what were the objections? Well, density quickly, that prior project was for 158 apartments. So part of the design was, okay, don't push the envelope to maybe the maximum. And so originally, like 78 of these units were proposed, not the 90 that possibly could be allowed. We've had 4 meetings, numerous conversations since the signage was originally posted announcing this attempted rezoning. And one of the first meetings we held with Area Plan, and they kind of served, I'm glad they did, I'm not criticizing that at all, I think they did a service. They kind of served as a clearinghouse to take suggestions and pass them on, and take responses and pass them back. And as a result of that process, really quickly, the units were cut down to 4, I think, were left right away. And some other things were added. The developer, for example, I think I mentioned, the entrance has now been realigned, so it's truly a T intersection of Adams, Meadows, and the new drive-in. That was done as a result of comments that, well, if they were staggered like originally designed at night when headlights were on and people were exiting, those headlights, whether they turned right or turned left, would shine into a building across the street, a home across the street. So, but the alignment of that means they just shine down the street like any other normal. So everybody was agreeable, and that was clearly an improvement over the original design. Streets in this proposal were penciled in at 50 feet wide, not the minimum 40. That was part of when I listened to the debates from 2 years ago, that was a feature. And another one was we added tree rows instead of what's been in the last 10 years, a no tree row development where the sidewalk starts right behind the rolled curb. We've added tree rows on both sides. Sidewalks, I think you're probably sensitive to that claim or complaint that if you only put them on one side, that's not ideal. We've put them on both sides. So some of these things were immediately, until recently, I can't think of any suggestion that reached our ears, our being the developer, Mr. Anderson, hasn't been incorporated into the proposal. Now, we're left though, and last night, Area Plan, after some hearing from both sides, but there weren't 300, or we'd still be there. There were a lot fewer people. A lot of them are here tonight too. That's fine. That's the process. But I think it's important to reach your ears. You'll have to hear it again. But there were some claims last night, some allegations that this whole process has been fast-tracked, that the normal notices weren't given, that everybody's in a rush to get this done. I know you know that it's just a normal track. Nothing's been fast-tracked, nothing's been done on an accelerated scale. The notices have been posted, the meeting times were posted, the places, they were correct, no issues like that. And I just think it's important that we note for the record, since that seems to be out there, we've not done anything out of the ordinary here as far as the timing and the process. It is what it is, and I think I'd like it on the record that we've abided by what it is. The three sticking points, kind of, at least as reported in the paper today, a couple of them were new. One of them, a lady last night spoke and was talking about she didn't want anybody cutting down her trees. That was news to me. I had no idea what trees we were talking about or who was going to do the cutting, because that had never, ever been a part of the deal. I found out today that somebody, not the developer, but somebody in the neighborhood, and here the neighborhood seems to stretch. It's not necessarily people from Beaumont, where there are only 6 houses, I believe is right. But somebody had suggested that part of the development include sidewalks being constructed by the developer on the city's right-of-way on property that's not in Beaumont subdivision, and it's not a part of this rezoning parcel. It's some third parties as between those two. It was this lady's house. And so I go out there and I talk to Chuck Ennis, the city engineer, today, and I go out there, and now I see the trees that she was complaining about are in the city right-of-way. She or her predecessor planted them. They're beautiful, they're mature. I think there's like 5 Canadian hemlocks and another one that I would think is an ash tree, a mature one. And if the other people who want the sidewalk there, if the sidewalk goes there, there's no way to do it other than cut this lady's trees down. It's not our property, it's not their property, it's her property. So I just want it clear that it's not anything, that point is nothing any developer can agree to. It's not, it's a third party's property, and Chuck Ennis confirmed that it's not in the Beaumont platted subdivision, and it's not in this parcel. So point 2, that seems to be a little bit sticky, is there seems to be among some a desire that the buffer between Beaumont, the south boundary of Beaumont, which is the north boundary of this proposed development, be landscaped with perennials, shrubs, and trees that aren't just the nursery stock that my friends, the Cummins brothers, like to sell. But the problem is, when I go to check, that strip is subject to an easement that the city sanitary district was granted in 2007. And when you look at this easement, what's being asked for can't be done unless the city waives its rights under the agreement, because the city's sewage rights, sewage and utility easement rights are that nothing can be done to the surface by the owner that would ever impede the city's right to repair or replace the sewer pipes. And as Mr. Ennis says, we like grass. Well, what about trees? We like grass. What about this or that? Read my lips. We like grass. So again, to ask or force the developer or think the developer can do this is not the issue. It can't be done. And of course, I asked the next question: would the city sanitary district ever waive that restriction? I don't have to tell you the answer. So 2 out of the 3 that are reported in the paper really just aren't achievable. And the third one is a desire that there be a 35-foot wide setback against this boundary from Adams Street all the way to Thompson Ditch. You probably know that the standard for decades is the minimum standard on that setback is 11 feet. That's the setback. If you look at the plat of Beaumont, it's clearly marked on the lots. They have 11-foot setback on their side. I've got several points to make. Number one, they gave up 11, but they demand 35 on the other side. Here's the problem with 35. It would mean that 10 buildings, 20 units can't be built if there's a 35-foot buffer of no build. The financier's analysis of the loan says if you eliminate that many units from being sold in the project, we're not interested in loaning, doesn't meet their requirements. They view it as an unsafe loan. They don't see any ability to get repaid if that many units are knocked out of the plan. There were other suggestions. Well, just shift, keep the same number of units, just shift everything south and pick up land that you move, add it to the north and no build. The problem with that are several. Part of that recommendation that came from a nearby resident means the streets move from 50-foot right-of-way down to 40. Well, we checked with Chief Fisher because I'm worried about safety of a narrow street with 4 right-angle turns, 70 condominiums with most likely elderly folks. What's the safety ramifications of that? And I'll leave it up to the chief to state what his preference is, but let me say it's not the 40-foot narrower streets for his equipment to get in and out. The other problem with shifting that is in the middle, it's kind of a layout of a perimeter of units all facing inward, and then a middle strip where there's 2 rows of units back to back. Back of one unit's the back of the other unit. And in between there, another thing we did, and when we reduced the number of originally planned units and shied away from 90 to begin with, trying to get as much space between side-to-side units, plus in this back-to-back, you just don't give somebody 5 feet where you walk out your back door and shake hands with the neighbor across. Those just, the lender, the financier's been very helpful here in their evaluation. They've got access to real estate professionals that, a small contractor in Terre Haute, Indiana wouldn't, but their unqualified opinion is if you only give those, and squeezing their backyard even narrower to 5 foot and 5 foot, they don't even get a patio out the back. And so there's like 40 units that go from the attractive list on the analysis board of the realtors and the brokers to, you just lost 40 more. So we're not interested in starting a project that ends up just like it's been for the last 10 or 12 years out there. Total stagnation, no growth. What's there, like it or not, the market has said it's not what is desired. So I tell you that the Area Plan Commission's recommendation was unanimous. It was a favorable staff recommendation. Then the commission unanimously approved this and sent over, you can verify, no conditions other than the normal ones. File a plat, file a detailed engineered sealed site plan, and 3, let engineering and area plan police scrutinize to make sure you've met the parameters of the ordinance as to R2. And I'm not willing to bet anything other than we'll get a really good scrub when that happens, if you see fit to let it happen. I think that, but I knew that would probably be the case, so I counseled early on in the process with the designers, don't do anything that requires a variance. Don't ask for a favor in your plan. Do what it takes to present it as what meets the code. That code, that ordinance is there to provide uniformity to design people out in the world. If every project had to be designed differently on different standards, different setbacks, it'd be chaos. And you guys would be meeting in and out, and so would area plan, and so would the staff. Those have been the standards for as long as I can remember, decades. They weren't developed by me. They were developed by the planners, the people that are paid and have the education and training experience to know what urban planning is all about and what's ideal and where the compromises are made, and they codify it. Yes, a former city council, not you, approved it, but you haven't seen fit to change at least these things. So I just ask that it be examined on its merits. I've seen that the basic points against it are it'll make traffic flows unsafe. The traffic study done 2 years ago was not done. It was done by a governmental agency, West Central Indiana, not me, not somebody I hired that said, make it come out this way. And the conclusion is that the 3 major arteries that are nearby, State Road 42, also known as Poplar Street, Ohio Boulevard, and Fruit Ridge Avenue, are not at all over capacity for their design. The load that were measured, yeah, every street probably, and certainly the 2 that run into and out of town at certain times of day, commuting hours, morning and evening, carry a higher volume than non-commuting hours. But even those loads that were measured by a governmental agency whose expertise is to do that, the conclusion is that 158 more living units would not have brought either of those up to capacity usage. So you don't have to check your common sense at the door when you come in here. If 158 weren't going to overtax the capacity, then 74 units of elderly, usually the buyers are elderly folks, most of them down to 1 car. And if 158 with a lot more 2-car families aren't going to overtax it, I'll leave it up to you to use your good judgment and deduction to come up with what that result would be. The other kind of claim against this project is that somehow it'll destroy, impede, denigrate, lessen the status of the boulevard being on the National Register of Historic Places. That somehow development here, there, will cause that to be either lost. The criticism is not specific, but the takeaway is, to be valid, it'd have to be something that would cause, to be lost or somehow restricted more than it is. But checking with, historic landmarks of Indiana and actually reading, and some of you already know this from other projects you've been involved in, once it's on the register, it's tough. I mean, if it's something that could burn down, yeah, a building, but this is a district. From 19th to 25th, the application and the designation, the district is really the 2 sides of Ohio from 19th to 25th. The housing that faces Ohio, just on each side, was found to be historically and architecturally interesting, along with the place of the boulevard. But from 25th to the park, it's the boulevard only, not the housing that's on the one side. So to argue that housing off the boulevard is going to jeopardize or threaten, the signs aren't going to come down. It's not going to lose its status. It's going to remain historical. I don't know, the cry is protect it. I don't know protect it from what? That's the question. I don't want to, there's other people that have some comments that I think would be favorable. I first would ask Chief Fisher to, don't take my word for it, hear from him on this street width question, because that is integral to not being able to widen the 35, the setback to 35. I'd like for him to at least confirm that that's his preference. You need to hear it from him. There's some other people. I don't know whether you want to have any, Mr. President, any kind of order, just first hear, you want hear one side, then the other, mix it up.
I'll just allow the public to come up as they will after you.
Okay. So if there's any questions now, I'd be glad to address them.
Okay, at this time, would any member from the public like to speak on Special Ordinance 5, 2018? And please remember to give your name and address for the record.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Brian Payne, 353 Adams Boulevard. And Bill,
I think.
I have been out of town, unfortunately, for a lot of these meetings, so I would just like to share some information.
Thank you, Brian.
And, I've got a handful left here, if any other members of the public would like to snag one of those. Excuse me. First, let me just say, thank you. It's a privilege to be back in front of this council. Let me catch my breath. It's been a long drive. I left sewer route school in Wisconsin early this morning to be here for this. Just because I do value this community, this neighborhood, and I value this conversation about this particular property. I probably should claim credit for a lot of Bill's comments and a lot of the discussion 2 years ago. And actually, I'll gladly take credit for that, because my goal has been to provide information so we can have an honest, informed discussion about this particular property. And I think what we saw last time is there is a lot of interest in this property because of its location near the boulevard, near Deming Park. Okay. And I promise it's going to be shorter this time. My points are much fewer, and I want to start by telling you something that I've actually shared with very few people since 2 years ago. As many know, but some may not, I kind of organized the effort to have that informed discussion 2 years ago, presenting before this council the findings of the data I collected, the analysis I'd done, the neighbors I'd talked to, the planning department, all the interested parties I could possibly talk to. It was ultimately decided, not ultimately by this body, but by the developer who had proposed that R3 to withdraw that apartment proposal. And, my immediate reaction after that decision, gratitude, relief, but I'll be honest, in the weeks and months that followed that decision, I had some disappointment. And the side effects of being a numbers guy is you look at the data, and I see what the data says, and I will tell you this, there were some pluses for those apartments. As I did the math to show, I forget the exact revenue, but it was not insignificant. It was potential revenue for the city. That's revenue we're not now seeing. But I also did the numbers on, what improvements would be needed to the city infrastructure to maintain a good quality of life for the immediate area and those traveling through it. And it was significant too. about $2 million. And I point that out just to say there's a lot to be weighed in these decisions. And actually, as Bill was talking, started several things that we're actually in agreement upon. And I think my one largest regret is that we're just now having this conversation at this particular forum, despite my efforts and many of my neighbors' efforts to have an informed decision prior to this. And you know what, I'll tell you this. I mentioned some disappointment, and when I first heard of Joe Anderson's proposal, I was optimistic. That's what I told the news. If you happen to see the segment, I still am. The opportunity to have development like that which is proposed on this property, that's what we fought so hard for 2 years ago, was a more beneficial use of that property for not only the developer and the local community, but the greater community. I understand that at the Sunshine meeting, someone with a financial background spoke to how beneficial that affordable housing, more affordable quality housing would be, and I couldn't agree more. In fact, if you look at page 3 of what I provided you, pages 3 and 4, this is right out of the research I did 2 years ago. And at that time, when we were discussing best use for that property, in talking to builders, we kind of identified, somewhere around $175,000 to $200,000 per unit is when it starts becoming favorable for a builder to build a single-family residential home. So I said, okay, let's take that price, and what does that mean for the broader community of Terre Haute? And if you go to the U.S. Census Bureau statistics for our community, and assuming, a good rule of thumb that your household income, no more than a third of that should go towards paying for your housing, 46% of Terre Haute could afford something in that price range. So I think Joe does have a good proposition that would be beneficial for this area, and I'm supportive of that and optimistic about it. There's also the potential revenue. I was actually a little surprised that Bill or no one else ran the numbers and gave them to you. A perfect case are the cottages. If you look at the tax revenue paid annually for one of those units, on average it's about $1,200. Take that times the 79, I have lost count of the proposed units on this one, you get right around $100,000 a year in tax revenue to the city. Take that over a decade, that's $10 million in revenue. That's significant and valuable, and I commend that. So for these reasons and others, I have enthusiastically collected data, talked to my neighbors, collected feedback from everyone involved from the minute I heard about this, and absolutely talked to the planning department, talked to my neighbors, talked to Joe Anderson. We have had several meetings, and that is what is behind my motivation. And so just briefly, I know because of this discussion about what was said when and by whom, I don't want to dwell a lot on it, so I just want to briefly touch on a few things on the timeline. I want to say it was early April when we first saw the petition, and I've included, the 2 important pages from that in the beginning of your packet. And in one, you have the zoning ordinance, which just has the written text of what is proposed, and then we have the preliminary site plan that was provided to us at that time. And the only thing I want to point here is this is the extent of the information that was provided us. So shortly thereafter, I held a neighborhood meeting to get input, feedback from my neighbors, those that would be most immediately impacted by this proposed development. And as Bill said, I did share that information with the planning department, and that was quickly passed along to him, which I commend the planning department for that. That would have been April 16th, about a little over 3 weeks ago, or more. Math is fuzzy at the moment. But bottom line, the developer and his attorney have had our initial feedback from a very early stage in all of this. Shortly after that meeting, Jared asked me, the executive director of the planning department, could my contact information be shared with Bill? And I said, absolutely. I welcome the opportunity to have a discussion about this. I don't recall how many days had passed. I hadn't heard from anyone, so I reached out directly to Joe, the developer, and asked, what we did last time, 2 years ago, is we had a small neighborhood group meeting with the developer. Joe agreed to that, and several of our neighbors attended. And at that first meeting, I had asked Joe, hey, could we see a revised layout with I understand you've taken into account some of our concerns. Could we see a revised layout that reflects some of that? And he didn't have it at the time, but he said they were working on it and that they would get that to us. It would probably be the middle of the following week. So throughout this time, I've been having into the planning department. I kept trying to move this forward and continue the conversation. Following that small group meeting, I then asked Joe, hey, could you and I'd like to go into the planning department, meet with the staff there, and get a complete understanding of what is needed when for review, get their input. Joe agreed to that and said he would bring, again, a revised site plan so we could discuss it with the planning department staff. And that particular date for that meeting was the Wednesday right before the sunshine meeting of this organization. So I thought, excellent. We can have a detailed conversation about what changes you've made based on our feedback. It will be in time to bring that information before this body. Let's do it. And we'll have the planning staff there, myself, Joe. We did have that meeting, but we did not have a revised site. That still was not communicated to us. So, unfortunately, I was not able to attend that sunshine meeting, and understandably, I think there was a lot of confusion, some anxiety, and some upset neighbors, and they were expecting, a little more information. So I continued the conversation and asked Joe, hey, could those of my neighbors that are interested, could we come see the cottages? Because it did become very clear after that first meeting, that's really what he intends to build. So can we see them? Can we view them? Get a feel for what's being proposed, since we do have a description here in the ordinance and a simple sketch, but not much else. So he did agree to that. And as we had our small meetings, and I'm sorry, I just drove in from Wisconsin, and I'm winging it a little bit here. So we did then decide to meet on that Sunday. Actually, believe it or not, this was last Sunday. Karam attended, several of my neighbors attended that walkthrough. We were able to see the cottages. And again, I had hoped we could have some additional information. And Karen was there when I was able to ask Joe, can we get a revised layout to see what you have told many of us different things. You'll be addressing some of our current concerns. We appreciate that. Can we see a simple sketch? And he said he would work on it, get it to us as soon as possible. And I will end with the timeline just saying it is now, today, we're here. I think we are having a good conversation about this, but we still do not have a revised layout. And I understand his desire not to submit a complete site layout for plan review through the planning department. That is his luxury. He does not have to do that all at the same time. And the rezoning for this, approval of that will be contingent upon approval of those later submittals. So yes, the planning department, I have faith in them doing a good scrubbing of the infrastructure, the other key things that the code relates to. But I feel we did not have, and still are not quite having, the discussion I would like to have about what we could have there, what's best for everyone, and not even best. My main point is there are some simple improvements, the three that Bill discussed, that I think, after meeting with my neighbors, one, would improve the desirability of that particular development, decrease some of the impacts on those most immediately adjacent to this development. And again, the reason we arrived at those proposed amendments, we have not received any revised drawing, have any further conversation. So that was Sunday. Then on Sunday, realizing we're not going to get one of these, I asked for a meeting of my neighborhood. And again, I'm still optimistic, and I was optimistic on that Sunday. If you ask anyone who attended that meeting, and I facilitated a conversation and said, and asked, based on this ordinance, based on this drawing, based on what we understand to be going in here, are there any improvements that could be made that would make you support going to R2? I provided some information on what goes into rezoning, what R2 entails, and we, through that process, arrived at the three proposed amendments. And I have included those, and I emailed all of them to the council here prior to this. But if you'd like to have them in front of you, they are the three next sheets. And just briefly, the first one, the 35-foot minimum setback. I would like to discuss that. Because it became apparent to me we would not get a revised site layout, I took it upon myself to try to revise it myself, based on the feedback I had gotten from different parties. Yes.
Before you say that one more time, the designer had heart surgery. He finished it from his hospital bed. This was delivered area plan yesterday, so
Excellent.
It's out there.
Great.
Just to save you some breath.
Okay. Excellent. So we do have a revised layout, and again, we're just now having this conversation at the meeting to decide this. I do appreciate that. That is something we have wanted, and so now that we have that, I took my stab, because as of Monday, we did not have this. So I tried to, based on the feedback I've had from everyone, revise the site layout to accommodate some concerns. One of those being the 35-foot setback that I proposed. And I just want to provide briefly a little more information. I have a description of how I created that setback. And I know there's some discussion of shrinking all the yards. I was very selective in what yards those would be. It would not be any of the center ones, because I realized they're already small, tight, back-to-back. I left those alone. I'm not going to go through all of this. The point of the exercise was simply, you can get a 35-foot setback on this property. Now, that is with the information I had at the time I drew this. Now that I understand a little bit more, now that I know that there's going to be a tree row in between the curb and the sidewalk, there are some things that, might change this, and that's why I want to have this discussion with some of my neighbors, with the planning department, and with Joe. And I will only make a couple more points about that 35-foot setback. It is not at all uncommon in Terre Haute to have that on a rear lot. You can look at subdivisions all throughout this community. I show 3 in here: Lincolnshire, Dobbs Glen, Meadows, our own neighborhood, ranging from a 35-foot, a 57-foot, and a 52-foot rear setback. So I don't think what we are asking for is unreasonable. I think we're just asking Joe to be a conscientious neighbor and give us an opportunity to talk about it. And I will wrap up here. And my main point is this. We have been diligent. I have been working exhaustively to try to have an informed discussion about this. You know, my career, my family, my health have all suffered for this cause. I know many of my neighbors are the same case. We're trying to have an informed conversation. My intent of going through that timeline is just to demonstrate those efforts on our part. As you saw right now, we were just handed a revised layout. So I ask you one simple thing. Would you please consider, no, not even consider, would you please table this so that we can continue this conversation and so that we can really come to, you know, a good, acceptable, best use of this property. And again, I'm optimistic. I told my neighbors this on Sunday. I have no intention of leading an opposition to this development. I want to get it to work. That is why I'm here. That's why I drove all day. That's why I have done everything I have done. So I think I will leave it at that. Our requests are reasonable. As of the information I had at the time when I made them, they are feasible. Sounds like there's additional information to be considered, and I'd like to do so. In order to do that, I simply ask, let's table this, let's continue the conversation, and let's get this figured out. Because I do think this development is best for this community, is best for Terre Haute, and I want it to happen. So, thank you for your time. I'll turn it over to my neighbors. I know they have other comments that they would like to share. And if at the end you would like to ask me back up for any questions, I'd be happy to address them. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
My name is Donald Hyde, and I have a few comments. The first comment I'd like to make, I'd like to get information. What I just heard gave me very little information. Gentlemen, you're going to build a big project on a very close piece of land that's not on sacred ground, but it's within viewing distance of sacred ground. You guys have got a chance to build and add to the 25th to Fruit Ridge, Poplar, and Ohio part of the city. And by the way, I didn't know that only 19th to 25th Street was on the historical registry. For my money, it's all the way at Deming Park. And that's a fact. With that in mind, I am more concerned about the people that are going to buy these houses. And that is all up to you. Nobody else but you. If you want to build, let somebody build there, you've got to take care of the streets. They've got to be safe. You've got to have sidewalks. And if they're only going to build sidewalks on the property they own and control, then this city council's got to have to come up with a way to get those sidewalks to Ohio, up Poplar Street, across Fruit Ridge. In other words, the main selling point to these homes are going to be two things: location and Deming Park and Ohio Boulevard. Now, if you're going to get elderly people that are already living there, and you're going to get some more elderly people to move there, the number one thing that that area has is the ability for people to get out and exercise, to go to Deming Park, to go around, to go up one side of Ohio Boulevard, down the other side, ride their bikes, walk. It's safe, it's good, and it's a beautiful area. In order to keep that up, you got to build some tree. You got to put in the trees, and you got to have the sidewalks. And the sidewalks got to hold. Second of all, and this is the only warning I want to give, and I hope you take that in consideration, is Thompson Ditch. Now, this is the third time I've heard them discuss Thompson Ditch. Well, I know enough about architecture, and I also know enough about ditches, that about every 10 years, no matter how well you build that ditch, no matter how well you maintain that ditch, it floods. And I just hope that the builders are aware of this. And finally, when it comes to the building of the houses, beyond, I know they're going to be made look good. If you're going to have a duplex, and I say this because I lived in one, where you've got a house over here, and attached to that house is another house on this side, and there's just a wall between them. Where you're wanting to build this group of houses, there's two problems. One is the railroad, and you're sitting on top of Poplar Street, one of the three busiest streets in the city. Soundproofing is a big thing. And if you're then going to build a wall between them and you want people to live there, you got to make sure that when you look at the blueprints, that wall is soundproof enough so the people have privacy. That's all I want to say. But if you will make sure the sidewalks are there and that they go somewhere, they just don't start and end, that's an eyesore. They go somewhere around the place, make it possible for people to get around, you won't have no trouble selling those houses, and you'll get your income. Thank you. And by the way, I support this.
Members of the council, I'm Vicki Wager, 3505 Ohio Boulevard. If you would like to get out of here at a reasonable hour tonight, I would suggest that if you would table this motion, I believe that the neighbors of the project would probably trundle on out of here and go home so that we can figure this out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Steve Winkelpleck. I live at 416 South 34th. The only thing I have, two things to say. One, we do want to see written what we're looking at. My father, who some of you may have known, was John Winkelpleck, President of Central Federal Savings and Loan. My father's idea was, if it ain't in writing, it ain't right. So we want to see it in writing and see what we're talking about. The other thing, in today's paper, I knew the meeting was at 6 o'clock. It always has been at 6 o'clock. City Council is scheduled to vote on the matter when it meets at 7 o'clock. Now, some in the neighborhood may have read that and said, it's 7 o'clock. It's not 6 o'clock. And I thought it for a while, thinking maybe because of everything the police have been through, they decided to move it back an hour. But I asked it be tabled for the above reasons, plus the paper said 7 o'clock. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Faye Cowan, and I live at 3715 Ohio, which is at the corner of Adams and Ohio. And here's a perfect example of why we have been here for 2 nights about the same thing. At the last minute, we get a revised copy that we have asked for. And who has it? Is it the people who own the property that's going to lose their property values, or is it one person and the developer's attorney? This is exactly what we've gone through. Not adequate, accurate information so that we can make a decision. I'm hoping somebody will make the motion to give us a little time so that we all can see the revised proposal and make some progress. I don't think we're all opposed to having something there, but we do want to know what it is. And probably all of you caught the comment that mostly elderly people, well, that's kind of like being pregnant. You either are or you're not. It's either a 55-plus community that falls within Indiana state law or it isn't. But this is the kind of muddled, trickle-down information that we've had to make a decision. Now, you think about it. You think about how much money you've put in your home. Would you want to allow one of these projects to go in your backyard based on, it'll probably be a 55-plus. There'll probably be older people. Well, I'm an older people. I'm 70. And that really doesn't carry a lot of weight with me because there's just a little too much wiggle room there. I need something in writing. I need it accurate. And I need to see it, not trickle down through 2 or 3 other people. So I hope somebody will make the motion to put this aside for 1 month so that we can get some clarity. Thanks.
Thank you.
My name is Melody Aiken, and I live 290 Cottage Court in the Cottages. And I absolutely love it. It's a very nice place to live. I have a bigger model. You can do whatever you want, make it as fancy as you want, or as not fancy as you want. It's as far as the lot size goes, at my age, I don't walk around out in the woods or out in the, off the sidewalk, yes, but I sit on my screened-in porch or my sunroom, and then I have a little garden area and plant my flowers, have some flowers out front. So I know if it's for seniors, which out at the cottages, we have people that are 52, but they don't have children at home anymore. Their children are older and gone. So, and then as far as walking around, they walk around when it's daylight, but once night comes, you don't see a car move in or out of the place. It's very quiet. And so I don't think as far as people worried about a lot of traffic, there probably isn't going to be any if it's older people, because most of us don't want to be out real late. There might be a few party animals, but not that we see at the cottages anyway. So it's a very nice place to live. It's very energy efficient. It's very soundproof. Wouldn't even know we're attached to somebody. If you didn't know they were there, we never hear anybody. We sit out on our screened-in porch, and you don't look that way. You look at, so we really love it. And I think it'd be a great asset to the city. When we moved back here from Avon a few years ago, we were just totally thrilled that we happened to go to the Parade of Homes and ran into Cammie King and bought one. We've actually built 2 because we found out after we built the first one that he would put a basement in the back. So we've actually sold that one, the first one, and had another one built and moved into it with a full basement. Even though we're elderly, we still wanted a basement. So, but we're very happy with it. We think it'd be a really good thing for the city. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Debbie Hill from 2901 South Brown Avenue, and I watch this on late night cable, so I'm really excited to be here. I'm actually a fan. It's nice to see all the regulars in person and put a face to the voice over here, and to show my 2 daughters what civic government looks like. So
You're on late night now, too.
what's that?
You're on late night now, too.
I know. I'm excited to watch myself. So. Hey, Steve. I said I would come tonight just to relay some thoughts and paint a picture of what the buyer, I'm a real estate agent here in this community, and what the buyer the person who buys into the cottages, so that you can think of the cottages when you think of this new development, what they look like, or what they, what kind of a buyer they might be. Anyway, as a real estate agent, I have access to the MLS, of course, and so this afternoon I searched the MLS for sold properties in the last 2 years, just in our MLS. And I looked at the average and median cost, and then sold properties in the cottages from the last 2 years. The average price of the cottage is over $60,000 higher than the average price of sold properties in the last 2 years in the entire MLS. The median price is over $80,000, almost $90,000 higher. So I think the value is good. So when I show the cottages, I'm usually showing it to a more affluent buyer. In fact, I've sold two. I'm nervous because I know I'm going to be watching myself later. I've sold two condos in the cottages, and I called both of those clients today and asked them if I could talk about them and, in fact, tell things about them that are personal, and they both said I could. One of the buyers was a cash buyer, and this is not the norm for a sale price of the nature that exists in the cottages. This is an indicator of a person who is above average means. The second seller, I often tout my friendship with this person. I'm real proud of him. He is actually the chairperson for the National Prayer Committee, and also on the board of directors for the National Day of Prayer, and he's here in Terre Haute. He routinely attends the prayer breakfast, and also in our nation's capital, which is also attended by the President of the United States, not just this one, but others too, and congressmen and women from our country. So as a person whose mother has recently purchased a condo in the cottages, I am comforted knowing that she lives in a community where neighbors around her will take care of their property and more than likely have the means to do so consistently. I spoke to both my mom and my other clients and asked what they like about living in the cottages, and both told me that the safety factor was huge for them. My National Day of Prayer guy does a lot of traveling, so he feels very confident in this community that he can lock the door and his home is safe. In fact, he also gave me permission to invite you in to take a tour of his condo if you would like. His condo is expensive. It's like the most expensive one sold out there. We're talking over $250,000. They didn't tell me I could tell you that, so that stays here and, on TV late night. So, anyway, I actually love the cottages. I think they're beautiful. I think the value is undeniably there. I think the sidewalks and they all have their own mailboxes. They look a certain way. It's a pristine community, and I think it's going to stay that way forever. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie.
Hello, my name is Jeffrey Aiken. I live at 2290 Cottage Court with the previous lady to this lady. I'm one of the elderly living in the cottages. It seems like this has been tabled for more than 2 years now with detriment to the income of the community. And it seems like also that there's a demand for this type of housing in Terre Haute now. As the previous speaker mentioned, the price point does not necessarily lend towards the first home buyer with young children. It is more senior than a lot of the places. We have professors at Indiana State. We have lawyers, prominent lawyers here in town. We have a traveling anesthesiologist that lives in the neighborhood. We have a worldwide published theologian that lives in the neighborhood. And then there's people like me that are just regular people that bought into the neighborhood. But it is a very nicely well-built community. It's not a community, but it's a very nice neighborhood. And as far as tabling anything, It's time to act. The apartments were shot down, which I can almost understand that, but some apartments are beautiful. But a small community like this that's built as well as Joe Anderson builds homes, I don't think it should be tabled. And I don't think that children accessing that community should be a reason to shoot it down either. I don't have anything against children at all. If they moved in next door, I really wouldn't care. But as I open this, the price point of these condos are not first-time buyer prices. So I hope you vote tonight. I hope you vote positive. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Susan Beeson. I live at 3403 Ohio Boulevard. And with all due respect, I don't think there is any question about the quality of the product itself. We had an opportunity to go out and see the cottages, and I think most people thought they were fine buildings, and everything was good. The issue, as I see it, is number one, we have asked for a detailed modification of the items that the neighborhood wanted, and we just were given that apparently last night at the very last minute. And because we are interested patrons and interested citizens of Terre Haute, we would like to just have an opportunity to look over those modifications. And I don't think that's asking too much, since we have really been quite active in trying to have an open conversation. The other thing I wanted to comment on was the issue of trees. As you know, that area has very large trees and it's well shaded and so forth. And the one thing I did notice when I went to see the cottages was the lack of trees in the area. So I talked to the builder and I talked to the realtor, and both were very forthcoming. And I said, well, what about planting trees? And they said, well, we won't be able to plant large trees or, trees of any substance other than just perhaps a miniature flowering tree in the yards, because the maintenance people who take care of the yards will not mow around those trees. So I found that to be interesting, and I don't know if that has any adds any insight as to the overall appearance of that entire complex.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Brenda Ponceau, and I live at 3607 Ohio Boulevard. I'm at the corner of Ohio Boulevard and Adams Boulevard. And I'm here this evening to plead with you to consider the people already in this area paying taxes. Andre and Antoinette Ponceau, my mother and father-in-law, and my husband, they went to the open house at Beaumont. The home was beautiful. It was the first home that was built on that property. The home was beautiful. And the information that they were giving showed this beautiful community. And so they invested in this community, and they bought a home, and that home's address is 31 Orme Court. And the home is probably the closest to the property that we're speaking about. And Dick, who spoke last night, is my mother-in-law's neighbor. And at that time, she was told that beautiful homes would be built behind her. And unfortunately, our economy changed, and I understand that. But a person, his word has to stand for something. And I also understand that everyone has to compromise. I mean, life is all about compromise. But please tell me if you think that it's fair that my mother-in-law can sit on her back patio and someone is going to be 10 or 7 or 10 feet in front of her. In fact, I'm really disappointed in the owner of this property that he isn't considering the owners that bought into this plan, that bought into this vision. and asking them to stay back and give these people the privacy that they deserve. I mean, they bought these homes. The back of these homes are beautiful, and they open up to a beautiful back view. They deserve to have that back view. A couple weeks ago, I attended a meeting with Mr. Anderson, and I looked him in the eye and I asked him to please listen to us and our concerns. And the only thing that Mr. Anderson could say to me repeatedly is, these are going to be beautiful. And so I stand in front of you tonight and I'm asking you to please forgive me, but I can't believe another person that's going to say to me, trust me, these are going to be beautiful, because we've already heard that. I am asking you tonight to table this because we haven't had time. We are paying taxes in this area, and our voice and our concerns are worth listening to. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anybody else from the public like to speak?
Mr. President, council members, my name is Jim Nichols. My property address is 110 Gardendale, located in Woodridge subdivision. I'm here strictly as a private citizen. I've been a lifelong member of this community. I grew up and live in the same neighborhood that I have since I was born. I need to advise that I am in the mortgage business. I think some of you know that. But I believe in processes. I believe that you all need to have information to make informed decisions. I appreciate and understand the people that are opposed to this project. I appreciate their positions. I'm here to speak about market conditions, and I may not be the appropriate person to talk. Maybe Debbie or Cammie King, as realtors, might have a better position on the matter. And for the record, you're going to outshine me today. Nice job. But I'm speaking about lack of inventory in our markets. So Debbie spoke about home value ranges and where the values of these properties will be relative to and with respect to the average home sale prices. I did a little research the other day. I made the same statement last night, that if you look in Vigo County, there are 55 homes for sale in the price range of $165,000 to $220,000 right now. I would advise that, in my opinion, and I'll defer to the professionals, that number is extremely low, that there is a huge demand, and Kurt, I apologize, you're a realtor as well. There's a huge demand for housing right now. I think that we have, in this price range, easily 3 to 4 buyers for every house that comes up on the market. I will tell you that we see sales prices that are at full price offers. We see sales prices that are above full price offers. I'm telling you that over the last 2 years, if you want to talk to, if you all talk to me, I've talked to various people in this community about the lack of good housing within city limits. And I feel strongly that we as a community need to do something about that, about good housing in city limits. With this project, I do believe that a lot of the homeowners that will buy condos in this development are going to turn around and sell their houses. And their houses are very comparable in price to the price of these condos. So that's going to help this demand as well. So obviously, I think it's a good thing when we put property on the tax rolls for the community. I think it's a wonderful area. One thing we don't talk about that I think is significant is the crown jewel of our town, which is our park systems. Deming Park is a wonderful place. I live very close to it, and there all the time. I think this has the potential to be a very good development for this community and for the people that are going to live there. I personally support it. I've been involved in the cottages project, and I think that it's been an incredible project, and I think it looks very well. It looks very good, I'm personally for this. And lastly, I would say that Again, I'm just going to reiterate that I respect everybody's position here tonight on both sides of this. It's your job as the council to make an informed decision. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. President, members of council, Jeff Fisher, Fire Chief, I want to give everybody else a chance to speak. First off, I want to applaud this development team for taking public safety in consideration on these streets. 50-foot streets. I wish all the streets in Terre Haute were 50-foot. I welcome any council member to take a ride on a fire truck down these streets. Check with us illegal. How many mirrors we take off, how many cars we rip open. We have a fire truck downtown called the can opener because it rips open cars when it turns. So I'm ecstatic that they're taking public safety into consideration on these streets. And with that, I will yield to whoever wants to speak. But lastly, I want to thank all of you for attending the visitation this week. It was good to see you there and support of the Terre Haute Fire Department in this time of sorrow. And closing, hi Debbie Hill.
Thank you.
My name's Jerry Varner, and I live at 25 Hamilton Drive. And I think along with a lot of these people, maybe a lot of you, we're exhausted. We're exhausted that every time a development comes up, because of some structure within the city, at the last council meeting, I heard there's not many people here. It was like, because there wasn't big objection, it must be okay. We shouldn't have to do this. It is the job of our city officials to be sure that developments agree with the neighborhood they're being put in. And because something's wrong in our system, we're finding that we have to look after everything, or something's going to slip in. Now, I do think there's a way to make this work, and I totally agree. We need these kind of subdivisions, and I think these condos are just fine. But I do think we need to pay attention to those who were there first and feel like they're being intruded upon. And I agree that we need to make sure the roads are safe. Perhaps the answer is maybe a fewer condos. There is a way to do it. But I do think they need to work this out. Thank you.
Thank you.
I said my piece last night, and I'm not going to repeat it really.
I'm sorry, would you please state your name and your address?
My name is Dick Wheefield. I live at 331 Orm Court. I hate to tell the lady that was very nice in her presentation that she gets to look at it on TV, because every time I want to see what the council is doing, I'm seeing an event that took place a month before. So maybe we can get the calendar straightened a little bit so we can. I am not against the condos, I'm against other things. But I have talked, and I think things can be resolved. I just don't want my piece of property affected, and that's my main concern. And Jim Nichols, I have to say, I've lived here longer than he has. And my lovely wife and I have been married 57 years, so.
Thank you very much. Would anybody else like to address the council? Okay, I'll turn discussion to
Mr. President?
I apologize. Would you like to come back up?
Just like to, Bill Ola, representing the petitioner, just like to briefly make a few final points. In addition to the people that spoke for and against, I agree, this is just a microcosm of the interest in this project. There are numerous local contractors and their employees, all told in the hundreds, and their families, who would support this project for the work it would bring to them. Wabash Valley Asphalt, Rick Jenkins Construction, L&L Drywall, Smart Plumbing, Maxwell Brothers Carpentry, Barrett Excavating, the list goes on and on. The point is, they're all local. It has this go or no go has a local impact beyond what might come and articulate at the microphone. The building season is here. The other problem with the fact that the financing would run out on a delay is that to get on the schedule of these contractors to do the infrastructure, to get the roads in, the base for the roads, the water lines, the sewer lines, they don't just wait for us to call them. We have to get on their schedule. Their schedules for this build. Now, granted, they're reaching out bigger geographically because all this work that they want to do is not available in Vigo County. They're traveling to other counties to get that work and competing against like contractors from Greencastle, from Vincent's, from Evansville. But the point is to get on their calendar to get the work done this building season. We've got to either pay money to secure our place that we don't have, pay a premium and a deposit, or run the risk that somebody else gets our spot. We get rain later, we run out of days, and if it goes into next year before the infrastructure's in, the financier has imposed a deadline after analyzing the business model of the project and the product and the projected sales that jeopardizes the financing. So regrettably, I can't agree voluntarily to any tabling. And if the fact that the petitioner is not agreeable to tabling, if the end result is it gets tabled anyway and the project doesn't go, I think you're owed the explanation ahead of time. That's all. Thank you.
I will ask one more time, is there anybody from the audience who wants to speak? All right, I'll turn it into the council now. Councilman Nation.
First, let me just say that I agree that this is a good project. I agree that these units will fill a hole in the local market. And I think that those are all important considerations. Things that concern me about what is given to us as a basis on which to make decisions. We don't have anything in writing anyway that ensures that there will be a sidewalk along Adams Street connecting to Ohio Boulevard. I think another concern is that I recognize that the big streets and having tree rows and sidewalks within the subdivision are all important things. But I think that you all understand from considering many rezonings that Mr. Ola's advice to avoid the variance process is not the right answer for this. Many projects that come before us have variances. And when I look at the site plan that has been provided by the developer, I see lots of room along Poplar Street. So the idea that this could all be shifted to the south and still conserve the tree rows, still conserve the 50-foot streets, achieve the setbacks that the neighbors want, is something that I think should be explored. It bothers me that we have a proposal that on its surface is something that I want to see happen, think would be good for the community, and think should probably make it past this body without a lot of trouble. It bothers me that there are so many citizens who live near it who want more information. And I really do believe that most, if not all, of the issues that have been raised by the public can be worked out with some time and maybe with utilization of the variance process. For those reasons, I move to table this.
Can I make say one thing about what he's saying?
There's a motion on the floor. There's a motion on the floor. I can't allow a speaker at this time. Okay.
Go ahead.
Councilman Nation has moved to table this.
And I'm fine with the table. You go ahead and go to the table. I'm fine with it. But I have to tell you why that variance process, to me,
We've got a motion on the floor.
Yeah, we have a motion on the floor. I certainly understand where you're coming from, but we can't take any public comment right now.
I'll second for the purposes of discussion.
Okay. You think that's the purpose?
Roll call.
Wait a minute. Can we say
Okay.
discussion before we vote?
Yeah.
Discussion?
Yeah.
Is this discussion or a second on Todd's motion?
I seconded Todd's motion so that we can discuss the motion.
Councilman Garrison?
Discussion. This is all I want to say.
Okay, please come on up.
Yeah.
And if you don't mind, please give your name and address.
Yeah, my name is Joe Anderson Jr., and I'm the principal of Park Place, which would be, I'm buying all the property, so. And my address is 3160 Linden Street, Terre Haute, Indiana. The reason why the variances weren't, because I have already purchased the property, and in hopes of getting that variance. And for me, if I don't get that variance for some reason, then I'm the next person holding the property and can't do anything with it. You know, as far as what I do. The cottages is what I do, that's what my niche is as a builder, that's what I build. I mean, they're luxury condos, you know, and they got 3-foot doors everywhere. There's no stairs. They're 9-foot ceilings. They're built for an aging population. I can't say that that's not the only person that could buy there because I'm not allowed to do that. I'm not a 55 and older. So, but that's what it's built for. And for me, I would love to get the variance, but I can't. I have to purchase the property and then get the variance. And then I'm stuck if I don't get the variance. You can't guarantee me that variance. And you know, if you could, I mean, that would be a different story. But you know, without a guarantee of a variance where I can move it down, the project, I can't do it because I can't put that, you know, it's a substantial, it's all my money, it's the money I have. It's my life savings. It's what I'm doing. And, you know, these people here act like, you know, that I'm trying to sham them or something like that. The person who was supposed to do this drawing was in the hospital. I tried, and I told them when I already told them we were moving several things, I accommodated, and then all of a sudden I got blindsided Sunday night saying I had to move my property 35 feet back and do all this and make mine where They have 5 feet in their backyards. I mean, I'm just trying to do the right thing. I'm an honest person. If I say I'm going to do something, that's my word. I don't care what anybody else says, that's what I do. And this is my life savings. And then, like I said, then I'll be sitting with my life savings here and coming back 2 years from now trying to sell it to somebody else to do something else because I can't build on it. I mean, some things just aren't fair either. I mean, when I build, my family's built $1 million homes. We've built all kinds of them. We know there's 11-foot setback on the back of those property lines. You can have whatever it is on the backside of your property. Somebody can build 11 feet, and people do that in large homes and others. And people like to set their homes in the back and have bigger yards in the front. And some people like putting their houses up front and have bigger yards in the back. I mean, we've done it all. But they know that when they build, if they're close to the 11, there's 11-foot setback, if they build close to that somebody can build up to 11-foot setback. Because these are residential homes. These are not, apartments. And they know that somebody can build from 11 feet back. That's been the rule forever. And like I said, I just had to say something because I said, this is my life savings that I'm putting into this, and I want, something. This is my area. I grew up on the east side. I love the east side, and my parents are going to be living there. So, I mean, it's not going to be a bad place. So, that's what I had to say.
Thank you very much.
Mr. President?
Councilman Nation.
Thinking about the legislation that's come before this council regarding changes of hands of property and rezonings, not only do we frequently see variances, we frequently see variances granted to current owners of property so that they can sell it to someone else. And that sale is often contingent. We're told by the attorneys who represent that the sale of the property is contingent upon them receiving fill in the blank, a variance, a rezoning, maybe both. I don't think it's unreasonable to ask that these things be worked out now on the front end, nor do I think it's a hurdle that this project cannot get over. I think that it's very possible that variances will be granted, probably to the current owner if they ask for them. I yield.
Councilman Elliott.
Bill, question. I think it's important for us to know, what this project is and what it isn't. So what's the width of the sewer easements?
15 feet.
15 total? 7.5 each side?
No, it's all on this property.
It's all on that?
None of the easement goes into Beaumont. The 15 feet is entirely on this parcel.
The 35-foot setback they're asking for on the south side, and it's 11 feet on the north side of the line.
Correct.
Okay. What's changed since last Thursday?
Well,
in your opinion? With the project?
The wishes of the requests for more changes seem to keep coming. We get word that this is desired, and like I said early on, 100% of the asks were granted. Now, 3 kind of appear, one of which is impossible to achieve because of the city's position. They will not release the city's rights that they hold on the surface of that 15-foot easement to let it be planted with trees, shrubs, and perennials.
That's so the city doesn't have to spend extra money if they ever need to fix their sewer line, by cutting down the tree, paying the labor to cut the trees, dig out the stumps, and then get to the pipes. That's the way it was explained to me by sanitary district and city engineer. So there's one nuance or new request. The second one that came since the date you mentioned is the issue of a sidewalk along the south side of Adams. It's not that simple. The lady last night, Mr. Nation, just said connect the sidewalk on Adams to Ohio Boulevard sidewalk, and the other end, there is no sidewalk to connect to. Let me be clear. The lady last night said, in essence, I am not going to allow the sidewalk to come down my side of Adams Street, because to do so, somebody's going to have to cut down some very valuable trees. So and Mr. Ennis said he's not willing to voluntarily go in there and cut those trees. The lady's upset enough. Why do it all over or worse? So at best, a sidewalk on the south side of Adams would connect on Poplar with nothing, and it would have to terminate at her back property line following the depth of her property, short of ever reaching the Ohio sidewalk. So it's a sidewalk that connects on neither end to an existing sidewalk. Number two on that project, there is no curb on that side of Adams Street. And the city engineering's not all thrilled about just building a sidewalk where there's no base, no curb, and to work in the city right away, you all know this, you've got to get a city right-of-way work permit, and only certain contractors can meet those qualifications. So without a curb and a gutter, and to install a curb and a gutter, you've got to dig up part of the hard surface on Adams Street to go down and build a base to pour the curb back, roll it up, form it all up, and then put a concrete sidewalk on the side of it. And there are several power poles there that you just don't, the city engineering doesn't just let you concrete around the pole. You have to start back and take the sidewalk with a certain turn radius around it. So it sounds easy, sounds relatively modestly expensed, but it's not. And then the request for the 35-foot pullback, you can go out there and look. The state highway right-of-way monuments are a concrete square post about this high. They eat way into the grass there. You can't build out in the state's right-of-way. And that right-of-way is probably 35 feet to the north of the edge of the hard surface of 42. So what looks like buildable space, you can eyeball it and see it's not. It can't be shifted that far south. From that right-of-way, you have a setback because that's a property line. And so there's another 11 feet if you put the back of those units facing Poplar. If you turn them around and put the front on Poplar from those concrete monuments, you've got to be back another 25 feet. So you can do the math. When you take 35 feet off of one, and if you have to set back 20 feet on the south from what is really the property line, not the edge of the road, that's 60 feet, and that's the width of that's the depth of these buildings. So you do lose a substantial number. Now, I'd like to address one other thing. Right here, when you ask for a variance, you're asking for relief from a minimum standard. If you want to go higher than the standard, if I wanted to build a 100-foot step back, I don't ask for a variance. I don't have to. I just do it. So when I say we're not asking for a variance, there's no variance that's needed to go more than the setback. Only if we wanted to go under 11 feet. And to be clear, before anybody says otherwise, we've never asked to minimize, to go less than the setback, either on the sides, back, or front. So we need to understand what a variance is. A variance is for, we want to do worse than the minimum standard. We would never ask for a variance to do better than 11 feet.
All I'm telling you is we can't do better. We can't do the 35. The last point is, I think it's a legal point. You have the authority, no question, you have the authority to pass or deny. But area plan sent over no restrictions, and except for the ones that we have to meet the city's ordinance with the eventual site plan. But they didn't put any, and I don't think you can tack on any restrictions because that turns it into a, excuse me, that turns it into a planned development. We didn't petition for planned development. We just petitioned for rezoning. And remember, a planned development is not a planned PUD. Those are, you got rezoning, PUD, planned development. This is a rezoning request. We didn't ask for a planned development, which is a rezoning with conditions. That's not what's before you. Just want to make sure. And again, you got able counsel that can verify that. You don't need to hear it from me, but I just wanted to remind you. Yes, sir.
Okay. I asked Bill and Brian to pay close attention here because I want to go through what I understand, what I've learned through last week's meeting, last night's meeting, other emails, phone calls, conversations of what this project is and isn't. Okay? It is a two-car garage project.
Yes, sir.
It is owner-occupied.
Yes, sir.
It is one story with, I presume, modest roof lines.
Standard pitch, not steep, okay. No.
Sidewalks with tree rows.
Correct.
$160,000 to $220,000 projected selling prices, which, as discussed earlier, are not for everyone in our market.
Correct.
Cannot be met. Okay. Vegetation on the developer side of the north property line only.
We can't go north of the property line and do anything to anybody else's.
Okay. Vegetation on the developer side
which is
of the north property line. Oh, sorry, south of the north property line. South of the north property line.
Yeah. Right. We can't do that in the first 15 feet of that area.
Only if there's more than 15 feet.
And there's a problem beyond that.
And then we have the sidewalk issue on the east side of Adams from Poplar to Ohio was subject to trees and, well, primarily to trees and a number of other issues that you just mentioned. And we have entrance and exit that aligns with the west side.
Called Meadows Drive.
Meadows Drive. Okay. So all those things are what it is or is intended to be part of the project.
Correct.
Okay. It's not, this would eliminate the possibility of R1 manufactured housing.
Yeah, if you convert it to R2,
okay,
you eliminate that possibility.
It is not multi-story.
Correct, it is not.
It's not multifamily.
Correct, it is not.
There's no vegetation requirement on the Beaumont side of the property line.
I've read the covenants and I find no such requirement. Correct.
Okay. And it's just an 11-foot setback on the Beaumont side or the north side of the property line.
That is true, yes.
Which is standard.
That's the minimum under the ordinance.
Okay.
If they wanted to come less than 11, they would need a variance.
Okay.
If they wanted to do it more than 11, they do not need a variance.
Okay. So what don't we know now that we should know? Or what don't we know now that we'll know next month?
The short answer is ordinarily nothing. But in this case, I've pledged I put my own integrity on the line and pledged, and I've also may need some help talking to myself in the mirror, I pledge that I can, to some people that have objections, that I view as the most directly affected to the negative, that I represented that I'm going to do my darndest. I may be biting off more than I can chew, but I think I can convince Mr. Anderson, as the plan develops, if this passes, if the rezoning passes, that's just the first step. That enables him to have to spend some serious money with a professional engineering firm to develop, to meet the area plan's third requirement of a detailed site plan with dimensions, showing all the details. But make no mistake, that is the normal course of things. You don't spend $25,000, $30,000 with an engineer before you know that the project's even possible. Not a local contractor. So the answer is...
I don't understand where you're going.
The answer is...
Get it in terms of an accountant will understand.
I'm going to work with them. Just because if it passes, that doesn't mean we can't work with the gentleman and the others to have their input, share with them, to see. Originally, you wanted tree rows. Would you be willing to trade tree rows for some of these other things? What's your priority? Because we'll put that together. We'll have to put it together pretty quick, but he's pledged that he can be available. So the answer is, I can't tell you if there'll be nothing developed that you wouldn't help you to know today. It could happen that way, but the problem's going to be, I think I got confidence in my own abilities, but I can't control what anybody else does. And the issue is, even if the city waived its easement rights and opened the door to the possibility of a setback of that size, if we forsake safety and shrink the street width and can use that to go toward, but that's a sacrifice that I don't know. I've got to talk to Risk Management Council and the insurance people to see, and that exposes problems with the fire department. God forbid a fire breaks out. But my point is, just because the development of the details won't stop. But here's the problem. He can come out and say what he told me or deny that he told me. He holds no power of attorney for anybody other than himself. We could meet his concerns and do exactly what he wants, but that's not going to eliminate the need for this microphone at a meeting that comes later, if one comes later.
Okay. I think I understand that. Now, thank you. I just have one other comment. A couple of years ago, Brad Emmer was here with the apartment project. He told me later he received numerous calls from other communities, and he took his capital elsewhere. So we lost him. And there was another... Pardon? Well, that's fine, but we're in a community that needs better housing, and lots of it. And he's not...
Councilman Elliott has the floor.
He went to another community as opposed to trying to find another site here that was acceptable to him. So that capital is gone. Just a statement of fact. And with that, I yield.
Would any other council members like to discuss this? With that being said, I'd like to quickly state my own position on this very quickly. If the motion on the floor is either withdrawn or fails, I am comfortable in voting for this project. I think it's a good project. I think it brings tax revenue to our community when it is badly needed. As a realtor, I very much understand the lack of inventory on the market right now within that price range. Having said that, Mr. Olaf spoke about a pledge he made and his integrity being on the line. I also made a pledge to many in that neighborhood that if this came to a vote to table, I would do so in the hope that maybe more compromise could be reached. My integrity is on the line with that vote, and when I give my word, I always stick to it. So that is my position on this. I yield.
Council President.
Councilman Garrison.
Just a question, Todd, you had made a motion to table. If we table it to the first meeting, that's a 3-week time frame. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I think that that would be fine. I realize that I didn't specify that in my motion, but the soonest, the next meeting of the city council is where I would move.
I yield. Thank you.
The motion is on the floor to table, which was presented by Councilman Nation and seconded by Councilwoman Crossen.
Council President, I called roll call too.
A roll call vote has been called by Councilwoman Aller. And the vote is to table Special Ordinance 5, 2018. Mr. Roll call.
Until June 7th, is that correct?
Until June, is that?
First meeting.
That's the first meeting.
Yes.
Councilwoman Aller.
No.
Councilperson Azar.
Yes.
Councilperson Crossen.
Yes.
Councilperson Elliott.
No.
Councilperson Garrison.
Yes.
Councilperson Morris.
No.
Councilperson Nation.
To table? Yes.
Yeah.
Councilperson Nasser.
No.
Councilperson DeBon.
Yes.
That's 5 yes, 4 no.
Okay. This, I'm sorry, Special Ordinance 5, 2018 has been tabled until next meeting. Next item, please.
Resolution 4, 2018, supporting the continued improvement of Ray Park in conjunction with private organizations.
Petitioner.
Mr. President.
Yes.
You want to take a 5-minute break?
Yes. We are going to have a quick 5-minute break. We will meet back at 10 after 8. At Resolution 4, 2018. Eddie, I apologize. I know I said we'd be back here at 10 after 8.
I just want to thank Michelle again for, she always puts me at the end.
Whatever I can do for you, Mr. Byrd, I'm here for you.
Petitioner.
Okay. I'm just here to introduce Mike, but I just want to say a quick word. That one lady that watches this all the time, I wanted to tell her Don Morris records it and watches that like himself like 3 or 4 times a day. So, I understand she likes to watch it. He watches it constantly. I'm just really here to ask the council to, first, Eddie Byrd, Terre Haute Parks Department. Resolution 4, I'm not here to ask for money. I'm just asking for your support on this. Mike Harding's been working very hard to relight the glow at Ray Park, and he actually started Friends of Ray Park as well. So we just want Mike to come up and speak a little bit to you about this Resolution 4, and we hope you support us. Thank you.
Thank you.
No.
Okay. Well, everybody's cleared out. I was a former assistant superintendent of schools, and I probably attended, 28 years, probably 500 to 700 school board meetings. And I know what you go through, believe me. So, Earl, do you think I need to give him a copy of the remarks that I sent you, or do you want me to go through it? Okay. I'm going to stick to these because I know Earl's got a piece that he wants to talk about, and Eddie and John might as well. And I know that Bill Verdine's here. He was on our group, and I didn't really start Friends of Ray Park. I talked to people about it, and there's a story behind it. So I'm going to share this story with you. But first, I'm going to talk about the history of Ray Park. This photo down here comes from the Ball State Archives. It was taken in September of 1925, and you can see the detail of the It's a wonderful building, and we're all old enough, Earl, aren't we, I think, to remember when it was bright white, red roof, lit up at night, a wonderful piece of architecture that we ought to save. So let me go through my presentation real quick, and then we can talk a little bit. William S. Ray was born in 1839. He was a grocer, and he had a partner named Beamet. They were prominent in west central Indiana, east central Illinois. You know where Larry Bird statue is, kind of canny-cornered across the street. There's a Workforce One building. I think that was Mr. Ray's and Mr. Beamet's office. They had about 300 grocery stores. So on one side, the Holman family manufactured the products, and he was kind of the retailer. So there was a relationship between the two. Mr. Ray passed away in 1919, and in his will, he gave the city $100,000 to establish a park on the south side. He also contributed $200,000 to Rose Poly in that will. In today's dollars, that's more than $5 million. And then when you account for Geraldine Ray, Mr. Ray's wife, she contributed $60,000, which in today's money is around $950,000. So you can see these people were very civic-minded. And I don't know if many of you are old enough to remember Ray School. They even named a school after him. She was a long-time teacher with the Vigo County Schools. There's in the deed, there's no mention of a golf course. Not one word, golf. It's about a park. He built a golf course to get the park started. But if you look at the literature in the old, the library over here, the microfiche, it talks about, swimming, it talks about tennis, it talks about ballparks, it talks about the golf course. It was really going to be a full-service park on the south side of Terre Haute. That road used to be really Dixie B Highway, 7th Street. It went all the way down to Sullivan and Vincennes and so forth. The course is built on 90 acres, and there's 70 acres that are non-golf course. And that's really what we're interested in, the clubhouse or the activity center, and the 70 acres that really are just sitting out there, not being used for much at all. It took 2 years to find the right location in the acreage. In 1922, the city signed an agreement with the Ray family. It took 3 years to build the course, 9 holes opened, and then another 9. As I said, Mrs. Ray donated. They came back to her and said, we've got this clause. We have to beautify and maintain the property. In order to do that, we need to really have, a building where all the social activities can occur. And so she gave $60,000 to make sure that the building was built in order to meet that clause. So a little bit about history of Friends of Ray Park. I came back, I was a grant writer for the school corporation. We wrote many grants. And my buddies, one of them, Karen knows very well, I said, I can't believe that, that building's in that kind of shape. He says, well, forget about that's just the way it is here. I said, well, I've written some grants. Maybe we could do something about this. And we had a little school in Otwell. I was in Pike County. Otwell, Indiana, I always had a little saying that big things can happen from small beginnings, because they were a little school, about 120 or 150. And they were always passing the I-step at an almost 100% rate. So I told Abe that, and so I kind of started talking to my friends. Scott Williams was at the Wabash Community Foundation. I met Tommy Kleckner at the Indiana Landmarks, and a guy named Eddie Bird. We met with Eddie, and I call that the original 4. And we met, and we started dreaming a little bit. So one of the things we talked about is establishing a nonprofit organization. And you just heard our attorney, Bill Lola, who grew up with Earl and I. He worked at Ray Park. He used to mow fairways and shorts and, an old straw hat. He looks like the epitome of attorney now with the gray hair and the dark suits. But I remember when he was a kid, and he's mentioned to us before that everything about life he learned at Ray Park growing up, because we were all with a bunch of adult people, that type of thing. Anyway, we also decided that Ray Park, it might behoove us to make it, put it on the National Historic Register. And so we developed an application. Oh, I want to say that Bill paid for the entire fee and spent, for nothing, and got us the nonprofit status. And then the city park department hired someone to write I don't know what they paid, $5,000 or something to develop that grant. And, it took 2 years to get it through it took time. And so we are on the National Register. And I wanted to say something about Friends of Ray Park. We're not all old and ready to go out to this development you guys were talking about yet. But we're all professional people. And, I have a master's in public administration. Earl's a CPA. Mr. Ola's an attorney. And a Rose-Hulman grad. And the connection there is Mr. Ray sat on the board at Rose-Hulman, and so does Bill Ola. And Bill was a former city employee there. It's kind of funny how this all ties in. And we also worked with a guy that you need to know, Dan Sanders. If you read the material, there is an architectural plan, and his staff was paid by a grant by a major foundation in town. They gave us the money to pay the staff, but Dan gave all his time, and it was hours to go out there and survey that building and kind of juggle this. So that's how Friends of Ray Park got started. We have a 75-page document that basically lays out our ideas and also how to renovate they call it the clubhouse, what we think is better known as an activity center for an entire park. So we also have in there what we call a case, why we want to do this, what is it we want to do, and how we're going to do it. So I know that's a tough document. Our board members at our school corporation would come in the night of the meeting, and we'd have to it took some time. So I know you probably haven't read it word for word, but basically it lays out all the details of the renovation of the clubhouse and also a master park plan, because it really is a park. So to kind of sum up, what do Friends of Ray Park believe about this project? We believe that the Ray family was prominent at one time, that they had a 1922 contract, and that it was to beautify, maintain, and forever be it known as William S. Ray Park. We think we need to honor that contract. We have 70 acres in a historic building that can be restored and expanded, and right now it's just sitting there with all kinds of potential. Ray Park is in the best location possible, a strategic location. Terre Haute South right across the street with 2,000 students. The hospital is there. A lot of cities, I know in Evansville, you see a lot about St. Mary's and Deaconess going together, and you see their name on recreational centers. The senior center, by the way, our hospital is owned by Hospital Corporation of America. It's a big outfit. And the same thing goes for the senior center. You have a major senior center there too. There's a medical community south there that is kind of connected with regional. But the thing about it is Ray Park is the land's there. It's accessible. It's got roadways. It's right there in the heart of the business area. It's really an ideal setting to develop the 70 acres and the clubhouse. We think it's visible. Everybody knows where it's at. It's just teeming with potential. We'd like to see partnerships with Terrell Regional, South High School. The principal's already told me, she said, Mike, we would use that renovated clubhouse or building all the time for extracurricular things. We can't use it now because it's just not in condition to do it. In Westminster Village, and as I said, the medical and business community there, Honey Creek Square's had a lot of problems. Maybe if we had some attraction there with historic Ray Park, it might help that a little bit. And I want to jump to this. Really, when you think about, I lived in Evansville for 35 years, and they are really moving down there. So is Bloomington, so is Lafayette. But I really envision the south side of Terre Haute. If you think about historic Ray Park and really doing something, with that park and that 70 acres, and then I know a little bit about architecture and school programs and school buildings. Terre Haute South, I've been in it, and after 50 years of having kids come into that building, it's pretty well shot. And I would say that, I mean, I don't know what they're thinking, but I know I went through a major renovation in our school district after 30 years. I can't imagine what those buildings really look like and how they're functioning after 50. But I could see a renewed Terre Haute South on that property and a renewed Ray Park. And wouldn't that be a real shot in the arm for a whole, south side of Terre Haute to be renewed like that at one time? So one other thing I've talked to Neil about, during our study, we've found out our health in our community is some of the worst in the state. Indiana's ranked 40th in total health. Smoking, drinking, drug abuse, obesity. If we're going to attract business and industry to our community, we're going to have healthy people. We've got the finest. When I moved down to Evansville, they had ISUE. It was Indiana State Evansville. They had about 1,500 students. They had University of Evansville. And, it was very expensive and had about 2,000 students. We've got Rose, and we've got Indiana State here. We've got a fine public school system, that type of thing. We've got the workforce skills here. We've got the location, the infrastructure. But our people, if you look where they rank versus Bloomington and Lafayette and Evansville, even Little Pike County where I was at, I lived in Evansville, but commuted to Pike County, we're behind. And almost everybody's ahead of us. And so there's got to have to be some kind of investment in our people so that they can be work-ready, productive, clear-minded, and able-bodied, so that a company can come here and take advantage of their workforce skills. So the last thing I'm going to say, and I'm going to give it to Earl, is that we think this can be a reasonable investment. And just for a comparison, if you compare the aquatic center, that, I don't know, it services, I would say it probably services a pretty narrow band of folks. What did we spend there? Under $10 million, that was the price tag. Maybe we've gone over, I don't know, but we think we could probably do Ray Park for maybe 60% of that. An entire, and that would serve a lot of people, a broad band of people. On the south side and for the whole city. So those are just kind of my comments. And I want to say something about Eddie, because when I walked through the door, I can imagine I had, some older people when I was in my late 40s and 50s walk through, and they wanted to do this and that, and I really didn't know what to think. But now that I've arrived at 65, and it happened really quickly, he has been very open to allowing us old geezers that are going to move into the home to actually listen to what we had to say. And so the result of that is the booklet. And what we need, I guess, is a resolution, because I have all the time people tell me, is the city of Terre Haute really behind that? That's what we're asking for tonight, really. So, Earl?
And I also want to acknowledge the park board. John Wright, the president's here. We've been to their meeting. Mike's been to their meeting several times, and they've been very receptive, and we've kept them informed as this goes on. There are very few combination golf courses and clubhouses that are this old in existence in our country. So, it's really kind of special, for that reason also. I don't know if you know, but the Russians would send junior tennis groups to the United States in the summer. They regularly played at Ray Park. And a number of them have played at Wimbledon and U.S. Open and so forth, those Russian players. So even the tennis courts have had some significant people on those. The clubhouse, when you get a chance, go take a look at it. The Parks Department did put a new roof on a few years ago, about $30,000, I think was the cost of that. And that basically just bought some time till the rest of it can get done to reduce significantly the potential water damage. The tennis courts, they're shot. Water seepage, they're in about the lowest part of the property. lowest elevation. They need to be moved, I think, to the south, if I remember right, what we propose to do. Add pickleball courts, hopefully add a golf training facility, golf academy, pickleball courts, playground areas, walking areas, just try to appeal to as many people in our community as we can, because we want a restaurant operation in the clubhouse to succeed. We need to generate traffic and bodies on the property. What we're asking for is this resolution that we will use in our fundraising materials, going forward. And after we get a resolution, then we'll work towards a memorandum of understanding with the city attorney, get some other resolutions or letters of support, and then we're ready to begin. We received, as Mike mentioned, a grant from the Community Foundation, and I believe there have been 2 grants from the Community Foundation, and another foundation in Terre Haute that's paid for the document I gave you last week, or Dan Sanders' work, and Mike drafted that document.
There was 2 parts. Dan's office did all the architecture, and we wanted to say, why do you want to do this, how are we going to do it, that kind of thing, what's it going to look like, that rationale.
Which is integral to our fundraising. The Friends of Ray Park also provided the money, the funding for a flagpole that's between the clubhouse and the 18th green at Ray Park, a large flagpole. Bill and Mike did the heavy work last fall. Sue, okay, Bill, Sue, and Mike. Planning, okay. Did the work to put the shrubbery and so forth around it. We still got a little more to do, I think, with that. It hadn't been the best spring to deal with that. We wanted to use that space eventually to kind of draw some attention to what we're trying to do down there. We've got a little bit of money in the bag. Mike's been to philanthropy school at Bloomington, IU Bloomington.
One of the things I did, there's a IUPUI, University Center for Philanthropy. They have a school of fundraising that's going all over the world. That was 20 years ago. But we had 2 individuals, I think, John's dad, Bob Wright, and a man named Paul Stanley, who was in the financial field. We like to point out the subcommittee. Those guys probably know East Outlaw. And as Eddie said, and he brought this up, you never know who's going to give something.
And then my wife writes a lot of grants, and she's anxious to get on the trail of some possibilities there, and then we'll explore other potential grant writing assistance to do that. We're looking at maybe $5 million to do everything that we need to do. I mean, that's an ambitious goal, but just the tennis courts and the clubhouse that have to be done or we lose them is over half of that. So, well over half of it. So.
One thing you might want to consider is that, I played a lot of golf in Alabama. The Alabama state government funds the teacher behind a series of golf courses they call the golf courses are. And each one of those locations was a Marriott hotel with tennis courts and other types of things other than just the golf. And they worked out some kind of relationship where they're using state land that they built some of their facilities on. We think that there might be someone out there might be a relationship, I don't know, that someone might want to go into the city and make an investment in Ray Park, land that we could do that. It could be a fire station. Years ago, a fire station, and Mr. Brighton was here. They tried to put one here. It's not really recreation, it's like park and recreation oriented. But there might be some partners that might approach us. One fellow that I talked to, the guy who did the apartments here for development, I saw him at the Rotary, Ron Massey. He'd like to come down to the park and see what the potential is. He's an apartment guy, but he may know someone in the business that might be interested. don't know. So that's what we're going, that's the next step, is to go out and start to really say, this is the plan, we've got the city behind us, and we want to see what we can do.
We yield. Yeah, go ahead.
Bill Burnett, I just want to bring, a lot of times people don't understand pickleball. How big it is in Ontario, it's ridiculous. And when I was playing last week, I was talking to them about Ray Park. They said, how many courts would they build? I said, why would you want to know that? He said, we have 10 courts, which is probably about what we have right now for tennis out there. He said, we can hold national tournaments, we can hold big tournaments, Midwest tournaments. And these guys around here they're not going to move. I'm just saying, this all plays into what? Clubhouse. We do the clubhouse. I know it's hard for people to understand. If you build it, they will come. The tennis courts, the pickleball courts, the shag range, we talked about how many guys would actually go down and help kids on a Saturday with a golf school. There's a lot of us that play a lot of golf, and we truly enjoy. I'm the assistant golf coach out Rhodes for men's and women's, and it's very fulfilling to stand there and watch a guy that you can actually help get better. And that's, I think this area of South Ontario brings something that you all want to do, which is better health.
Thank you. At this time, I'll ask if there's anyone in the audience who'd like to speak on Resolution 4, 2018.
This time I won't talk long, guys, don't worry. This time I'm actually knowledgeable. You're actually talking about a subject I've researched all my life on. And I'd like to add some stuff that you haven't mentioned. First of all, the Terre Haute Parks Department. The north part of Terre Haute has 3 fabulous parks. The east side of Terre Haute has the main park of all and the main nature park of all. The west part, or Terre Haute, or right downtown, has the main park by the river. Now, I want all the 9 of you to think, and other than, I can't even name the park, name me another park that's south. Name me a city park that's south.
Voorhees Park.
All right, Voorhees Park. No, Voorhees Park. But what happened to Voorhees Park? The school corporation took half of it over. Voorhees Park is one of those parks I'm talking about that shrank in size. There's another park, actually there is no park south other than that. Memorial, the one next to south, if that could be turned into a park, that would be a very good park and a very good location where there are no other city parks. I 100% agree that's needed. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else want to speak on Resolution 4, 2019 from the audience? Councilwoman Aller.
I know we were talking about pickleball, how big it's gotten. In my district, there's Brittle Bank Park, and Eddie, I guess I'm referring to you, on how many courts are out there? 8. Is there 8? And it's really picked up, and for a small, a small neighborhood park, it's brought a lot of people to that park, and it's thriving, and I do know that there is a need for a lot more courts, and it's gotten big, and I guess I'm excited because, we had a park sitting there that wasn't getting much traffic flow, people flow, however you want to say it, and it's really helped that little park down there. So, I yield.
Councilwoman Crossen.
Yeah, I may be the only person at this table up here anyway who didn't grow up in Terre Haute, but I've lived here since 1988, and one of the first things I was really excited about when I moved here was the parks. I think we have great city and county parks, and I think that I'm not unusual. The other people I know who have moved here from other places think the same thing. And so I'm very excited about this kind of public-private cooperation to make one of our parks a dual, even more so than it already is, and to make it a place where we'll see lots of different kinds of activities. So I think it's very exciting to see private citizens like yourselves, and there are some other examples in the community where that's happening, get going on a project like that, and I really want to give you a lot of credit for that and hope we can be helpful in lots of different ways in the coming years. I yield.
Councilman Garrison?
Yeah, I just want to say, I think this is a great project, and I appreciate everybody's help on this, and particularly this group of four, Bill Verdine and Bill Olaw, you said, Mike Harding, Earl Elliott, and particularly the Parks Department, got a couple of them here. And this is Friends of Ray Park, is that right, Earl?
Mm-hmm.
If somebody wanted to write a check to this group, where could they send that?
I can get you that information, but I handle the accounting. We have a post office box, and
Okay.
I can get you that.
That'd be great. There might be somebody out there who wants to donate. Apparently, our cable ratings are increasing, so maybe we can say that here next month.
Yeah, thanks, Ed.
But seriously, thanks for leading all this.
Free
Appreciate it.
commercial.
I yield. Mr. President.
Councilman Nasser, Councilman Nation.
I was just going to move for approval.
One of you guys put the coin.
So if there's no further comment, I move that we approve resolution number 4, 2018.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilman Nation, seconded by Councilman Nasser, that the council approves Resolution 4, 2018. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
It has been moved to adjourn by Councilman Azar and seconded by, which council member seconded it?
We're just going back to it. We've been sitting.
Councilman Nasser. All those in favor say aye.